Right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Growth and Regeneration Scrutiny panel. The first order of business today will be to appoint an interim chair. Unfortunately, Councillor Pandor's had a bit of an incident and he will join us as soon as he can. So can I ask the members if we have anybody who will be chair? Nominate, please.
Can I now nominate Councillor Harry McCarthy?
Thank you. Do we have anybody to second that nomination? Thank you. Can I invite Councillor McCarthy to the desk, please? Thank
you. Thanks, everyone, I think, depending on how this goes. First item on the agenda is membership of the committee. So if we can just go around and start with Zarina, just introduce ourselves.
Hi, my name is Councillor Amin. I'm from the Ashbrow ward.
Morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. Councillor Manisha Roma Kaushik from Crossland Moor and Netherton ward.
Good morning. Councillor John Taylor from Kirkburton ward.
Councillor James Taylor, Portfolio for Finance and Regrowth and Regen.
Councillor Moses Crook, Portfolio Holder for Highways and Transport and Housing, Home Valley South ward.
David Shepherd, Strategic Director for Growth and Regeneration.
Councillor Lee Richards, Newsom ward.
Chris Friend, Co-op T.
Jonathan Milner, Co-op T.
Edward Highfield, Service Director for Skills and Regeneration.
Rashid Mahmood, Interim Head of Major Projects.
And we have a member of the public here as well. And I'm Councillor Harry McCarthy from Conn Valley ward. Do we have any apologies?
No apologies received.
Minutes of the previous meeting. So we have minutes of the meetings held on the 10th of October and the 20th of November last year. So I'm willing to move the first set of minutes. I think only Councillor Amin and Lee Richards were there for that one.
I'm happy to do that.
I'm happy to agree the minutes as well.
We're happy to approve those as a true and accurate record. Yep. And the second set of minutes, so I'm willing to propose and second them as well.
Propose them then.
Yep.
I'm happy to second that.
Yeah, I'm happy to accept those as well. Yeah. Any interest to declare?
None, thank you.
I think Councillor Lee Richards had.
Possibly there's a mention of Homefirth Town Centre and a charity I'm a trustee of might have done some of the earlier groundworks clearing the river of inns.
Okay, just to make it as well, I think I am a member of Slowett and Marsden Action on Rail Transport, so just to make members aware. Admission of the public, all items will be held in public today, and we have a member of the public with us. No deputies and petitions, as far as I'm aware. And public question time, we have Chaz Ball to ask some questions.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Chaz Ball. I'm Secretary of the Cycle Kirklees, the Kirklees Cycling Campaign. We tabled 5 questions, 2 on major projects. Would you like me to read the first one? Yes. Primrose Lane, Liversedge. Tranche 2 of the Emergency Active Travel Fund, now designated ATF, had a requirement for schemes to have begun delivery by March 2021. Why are we still waiting 3 years later for design capacity, whilst the Primrose Lane active travel route is in the worst condition of all highway network?
Okay, I'll pass that on to the portfolio holder and officers as well, if they'd like to give a response.
Okay, so if I may just say before we answer the questions, I think both the spirit in which the questions have been asked and answered is a very kind of collaborative and positive one. So thank you for the questions, and we can follow up outside on any detail. So specifically in relation to Primrose Lane, you're absolutely correct. This has taken a long time to develop. Certainly my involvement with the project and the issues that I think has caused the delay is more around finding the correct surface than necessarily design capacity. There's been enormous discussions about what the correct surface treatment is, and different user groups have got different opinions, and we've had to try and navigate a path where we're not going to please everybody. We have to find the option that we think is best overall. So whilst we recognise it has taken too long, we have now, I think, got a resolution to those issues. The detailed design is now complete. We're firming up the costs to ensure it's affordable. Much of the proposed works affects unregistered land. There is also complexity, therefore, around third parties, a retaining wall. Some of the land is unregistered. So there is detail to work through, but we are moving forward with that now. We think we should have a positive outcome soon.
You can have a supplementary, but just to clarify, there are 5 questions. So.
Thank you. I'm pleased with the answer, thank you. That we wanted to put a spotlight on something that has got stuck. My second question is about the Transpennine route upgrade. Recognising that closure of greenways for periods of over 4 years in some cases is a requirement of the TRU, why is there low priority given to planned diversions, advance warning of closures through signage? Why is there no public information programme for walkers and cyclists? For example, using a dedicated website like Walk, Wheel, Ride Kirklees.
I'll pass this on to the portfolio holder and officers to give a response.
Okay, so yeah, as you alluded to, this is a significant issue, and it's one that we need to get right because of the scale of the works and how long they are going to be taking place for. It does speak to, at the heart of this really, I think, understanding our role as the local council alongside Network Rail's role as the delivery body for Transpennine Rail upgrade. So what happens is that Network Rail provide what's called an advance notice to all affected temporary and permanent road and public rights-of-way closures. They provide that notice to the council. We then use that information. We publish the closures on the One Network website, which is meant to be the sort of the single source of information that then other things can be triggered from. Due to the scale of the project and the interdependency of the programme with the train operators, amendments to the programme are often provided at short notice. So it would be great to think that all of these things are going to be absolutely to the programme, to the plan, and that we're going to stick to that plan. There are inevitably going to be changes and amendments that need to be made, and that closure periods may have to be facilitated quite quickly. Any such amendments to closures based on TRU's programme are updated by the council as soon as we are aware of them on the One Network system. Alongside all of that, Network Rail also have a responsibility around their general communications. They will notify key stakeholders as well. Network Rail are responsible for planning the diversion routes and associated signing, but they do share those proposals with the council. And when it works well, and we have time, we can engage with Network Rail, we can challenge them on some of the diversion routes. Is it really the most logical? Some of the local knowledge of the teams on the ground can add value to the Network Rail process, but we have to hold our hands up and say sometimes that isn't always possible. But when it works well, we are able to influence those diversion routes and the signage when we have time to do that. We have working group sessions. We have a highway network management working group set up, which meets regularly with Network Rail where that takes place. It's Network Rail's responsibility to manage the signage and the implementation of it. However, the council does conduct checks on the signage, either because we know it's been planned, we knew it was, the day it was due to commence, for example. We will send a team out to go and look at that signage, and we will also do that in response to queries or concerns from members of the public, and then we relay those issues straight to the Network Rail team, either their contractor on the ground or Network Rail themselves. So we are working intensively. We have a member of staff who does this on a very regular basis, but given the scale of the works and the speed at which sometimes they have to be put in place, clearly I think the question indicates that we haven't got it right on every occasion.
Thanks, Edward. And Charles, supplementary as well, or next question?
No, I'll only restrict myself on that to say I am raising it at the West Yorkshire active travel panel because it has implications over the next several years for ourselves as well as Leeds and Bradford. And it's not something that will go away. I must move on, if I may, to the transport strategy issues. The first question is LCWIP, the local cycling and walking infrastructure plans. Will the LCWIPs be expanded to a full network rather than just the 5 corridors that were included when discussed 2 years ago. We note there is still no Kirklees network plan for cycling and walking. This was discussed with officers in 2018-19. Can we have a timetable on its availability for consultation?
So we don't have all of the answers to this at this point in time. So LC WIP 2 is a West Yorkshire Combined Authority-led process. We understand that WICA intend to consult on this work alongside the LTP4 work, which is pending. I think that would make sense to do it that way. Several unexpected things have contributed to a delay at WICA, not least of all the loss of their active travel policy officer and a delay in some of the guidance from government around LTP4. However, we understand a replacement officer is soon to be in post, so we expect some traction on that to progress quickly thereafter. So I think some of the specific answers to the questions are going to have to wait until we see a little bit more guidance and what WICA are going to consult us with, and we get stuck into the LTP4 timescales.
I would simply say, Mr. Heifel, that without a network plan, we are often in a position where we feel there is inadequate recognition of investments that have been made in the past, for example, the Fenny Greenway. I think it's regrettable given that there is potential funding from Network Rail for some of their first mile funding, and we don't have a sufficiently developed network plan. But I'll move on, if I may, to a similar issue on my second question under transport strategy about the greenways. Why is there no reference, this is in this transport strategy, to the strategic importance of the traffic-free greenways in Kirklees? The Birkby-Bradley Greenway, the Calder Valley Greenway, the Spen Valley Greenway, the Ossett Greenway, and the Meltham Greenway.
Okay, so I think this might be attributed by an omission in the report. So the report today for scrutiny isn't the draft transport strategy, it's an update on transport strategy matters. So if there are omissions in the report that was published for today, please don't take too much significance in that. I think that is a mission that we can hopefully correct. Kirklees does absolutely recognise the importance of our extensive network of traffic-free routes, and we feel we have a successful track record in attracting funds via the likes of Active Travel Fund to expand this network, the results of which can be seen in some really good quality work, as you'll be familiar with in terms of some of the narrow canal improvements, for example. Further towpath schemes between Slough and Marsden, as well as the Huddersfield Broad Canal between Huddersfield and Cooper Bridge, are also in development. Furthermore, Kirklees have major project schemes in development for our greenways, including the Spen Valley Greenway with Transforming Cities Fund, notwithstanding the constraints of TRU, which you've already mentioned. We are also working closely with Sustrans on network development and bidding opportunities for years to come. And you mentioned the first and last mile from Network Rail. I think Kirklees Council's probably done better than any other local authority in terms of the first and last mile process from Network Rail so far, because we've got a pipeline of schemes. So I guess the point I'm trying to make in this answer is because if there was insufficient reference in the paper for today, hopefully we can provide some reassurance that that's not a lack of significance and a lack of priority given to it as an issue. That perhaps is something that wasn't done justice to in the paper.
One short supplementary. Are you aware that the warden that maintained the Spen Valley Greenway, the largest we have, was released at the end of December, so there is no one organising the volunteers there anymore? Sorry, there is not the presence of the volunteers and the warden to do the lifting of the rubbish. It seems to have been deprioritised. Perhaps you could look into that. My last question is safety schemes. Brian Deegan, Director of Inspections at Active Travel England, has recently met with all highway authorities in England to explain how maintenance funds can be used to build new active travel infrastructure, e.g. Cyclops junctions. Yet when we, Cycle Kirklees, respond to safety scheme plans to request improvements for the safety of people on bicycles, we are often met by officers with the response, "This isn't a cycle scheme." Will active travel be adopted as the first design consideration in all works to support a faster mode shift to active travel as part of the transport plan or prior to its adoption. This will reduce costs in the long run, as recently designed junctions will in future need updating to meet safety standards.
So on this one, Chair, I have over a page of response for this question, which I probably don't propose to read out, but perhaps we can make that available offline. I think, suffice to say, there is a lot of detail there. Maintenance of the highway network is a massive issue for local authorities up and down the country. So historically, you'll be aware that where capital funding has been made available for new schemes, that's brilliant. We want to secure as much of that as possible. The challenge that is looming large for every local authority, including Kirklees, is maintenance. And so the point being there are lots of other things that maintenance funding is desperately needed for. But your overriding point with the question, I think, is correct, that we need to the extent that we ever have, we need to stop seeing active travel as sort of a separate standalone activity that's pursued on its own, and think much more about how we can try and embed active travel solutions and outcomes into everything else we do, including regular maintenance. We have made some steps towards that. For example, we have an active travel working group with members from the Major Project Service, the policy team, and the highways team, looking at future planned maintenance and 2, 3, 4 years out in advance, so that we know about it, we can see if there are any opportunities. And often those highways colleagues are the people that know the network the best, so they have some of those, that pipeline development and those early wins in mind all the time. So I think we agree with the kind of the thrust of the question, and I have a much more detailed answer, which I'll make sure you get, if that's okay, Chair.
Thanks, Edward. If we could make sure that circulates to members of the committee and Mr. Ball. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. That concludes my questions.
And thanks a lot for your time in coming here today. It's greatly appreciated. Next item on the agenda is the transport strategy. So I think the portfolio holder is going to introduce that, and then we'll pass on to officers.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'll just give a quick introduction on this item before handing over to officers to give some more detailed introduction. The report will provide an update on the development of our Kirklees transport strategy, including priorities, work done to date and areas still in development, in line with the request from Scrutiny. And it's just worth noting that since this strategy is still in development, there is an opportunity here for panel members to offer suggestions and input, which I'm sure will influence the ongoing development process. So our Kirklees transport strategy will complement and align with both West Yorkshire Combined Authority and national strategies, helping to ensure that common themes will be implemented to best promote our Kirklees priorities and interests within that. It's clear from the report that this will quite rightly be an inclusive strategy, with public transport and active travel as central themes, alongside a renewed commitment to our 2038 net zero ambition, which is essential since transport is now the largest contributor to UK emissions by sector. The strategy will promote choice and appropriate modes of choice for appropriate journeys. Whilst it's very much pro-sustainable transport, this does not translate to being anti-car. The strategy, by increasing accessibility to lower carbon transport modes, along with education and incentive, it's possible to make sustainable transport an obvious and easy choice, promoting adoption without being prohibitive towards car travel. So the strategy and its content ahead of full adoption will inform current and future projects, improve and enhance inclusion, and contribute to, both to economic growth and to meeting our 2038 commitments. So that's just a short sort of overview of where we're at, and I'll hand over to officers for some detail on this item now, if that's all right. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Crook. I was going to sound like you've gone a bit more detail than I was expecting, but I was going to do something similar. I was going to just basically go through the paper and then hand it over to the panel members to add any questions. The paper sets out a position, the Kirklees transport strategy and the vision, and then it goes on to talk about how that alignment is quite important, that we do that in terms of the Kirklees Council's emerging local development plan and then the West Yorkshire emerging local transport plan. So a bit of background on the strategy. It's been developed. It's with our colleagues now. It's being pulled together. The strategy will look to serve some of the following purposes. It's quite important that the strategy aligns with the council priorities in achieving our ambition net zero objective that was mentioned earlier. It's quite important that we provide the adopted position for the council, position on transport policy and its objectives. That's quite important. That sets out the direction of travel and how the programme we develop aligns with that policy position and the initiatives that we move forward with. It will also establish the evidence position on that, which is going to be quite critical moving forward, certainly when it feeds into the development of the local development plan. And the support that we will give to the wider the combined authority in developing its local transport plan for West Yorkshire, often dubbed as the LTP4. And that's planned to take both the local development plan review and the emerging LTP4 is being drafted this year, and we hope that we'll be in a position at the end of the year to give a firm position on that. And I understand that the LTP4 is to be published in 2025. As mentioned earlier, it's quite important that the strategy will align with both the regional, local, regional and national policies. The net zero is a key focus for us in ensuring that both the strategy and the net zero ambition will get ready for net zero by 2038 are aligned. And behind the strategy, the paper sets out the current transport vision that we have, and it's important that the vision overpins, oversees the direction of travel of the strategy. Some of the themes that this will include the issue of private car and its dominance at the moment, but importantly, it must align with a fully integrated active travel links. And it must be supported by a first-class, reliable and affordable public transport system. And this kind of brings into this theme of ensuring that we have improved connectivity and that access is easy across the district and it's accessible. So the transport vision in a nutshell, I'll probably sum up in 3 bullet points. It's about communities across the districts, ensuring that the communities are connected and have equal access to the opportunities. Transport affordability for all is a priority, and in that health and sustainable travel is an obvious and easy choice. So the transport strategy in delivering that vision will be instrumental in moving that forward. And it must recognise the importance of working with WICA and the neighbouring combined authorities in bringing that forward, especially around the rail, which the paper does go into. This strategy will set out our long-term approach. It will certainly allow with some of the other emerging strategies, the bus reform that's coming along, the West Yorkshire active travel strategy and the integrated rail strategy. The paper then sets out the vision, which I've just kind of briefly touched on, and then it kind of goes through the various other modes of transport. It looks at active travel, bus, rail, to name a few. Just quickly summarising the position within the paper around some of these. I'll do that very quickly. Well, active travel, as I said before, remains an integral part of our approach, and it certainly supports our vision for a sustainable transport moving forward. And we will continue to work with our Kirklees Active Travel Partnership colleagues and our partners in developing that and ensuring that we get the best version for Kirklees. Bus as is still a very important key focus for us. It's the most heavily used form of public transport across the district. And since the pandemic, the bus network in Kirklees has somewhat suffered to an acceptable level. So bus reform recognises that and the need to change the way local buses are run. I understand the recent consultation has just ended. And the Kirklees Council's position that is fully supportive of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority Traveller on this, but it recognises the importance of working with our operators in making sure that we have all our partners supporting that vision moving forward. Quickly on the rail, we have the West Yorkshire Rail Strategy. And just to briefly mention, it's an important part of our integrated transport vision moving forward. It certainly will help towards facilitating a shift towards a more sustainable and efficient modes of travel. And I will probably talk about later about the Transpennine route, and that's an integral part of that in ensuring that that we recognise as a district that it's working with the West Yorkshire, but also working with neighbouring authorities and mere combined authorities outside that region, and how that can support Kirklees moving forward. The rail strategy is quite important in ensuring that we have the best facilities that we can, that provide both a safe and a secure and attractive environments for our users and our residents. Quickly on the road network, we accept that some new road building will be necessary. That will help towards alleviating the congestion hotspots that we have, but also quite importantly bring forward development sites that are critical in supporting our growth and regeneration plans for the district. But behind that sits a very important factor that we want to improve safety on our roads, and we want to support with particular concerns for those walking and cycling and wheeling. The paper then goes on to touches about decarbonisation. It recognises that road transport is one of the biggest contributors to air pollution, and that the strategy and the region supports a comprehensive electrical vehicle charging network within the district. In that we want to shift to a more environmentally friendly car systems, and behind that we also want to work with the bus operators to move to a near to zero emissions bus fleet. And just to finish off, I'll talk a little bit about the local transport plan. That's in development now. It's hoped to be published somewhere in summer 2025. It will replace the current transport strategy 2040. And we are working with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority colleagues in ensuring that our influence and our what we think is right for Kirklees is community across. Chair, I'll end it there. Thank you very much, and pass it back to you.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive report. I've got John Taylor who's put his hand up. John.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the update. I've actually got quite a lot of comments and questions. I'm going to start, if I may, with something a little controversial, and that's about cars. Because I'm sorry, I'm not against cars. I fully support what we're trying to do in terms of getting to net zero, but I actually worry that perhaps we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. One of the greatest things that cars did in the 20th century was enable people to have freedom to do things and get around and get to where they want to get, when they want to get. What we seem to be doing at the moment is pushing people out of cars because of concerns around the CO2 emissions, which I get, understandable, but you're restricting people's freedom. If you're forcing them onto a bus that only comes, if they're lucky, twice an hour, which is what your ambition is, but in some of my ward, and I represent a more rural ward, we don't have buses, or they come once every blue moon. So you're restricting people's ability to get around, and that has an impact on economic growth as well. If you can't get around, if you can't get to work, if you have to leave work at a particular time, because if you don't get that bus, there are no buses that night. So I do worry that there's nothing in our strategy that's looking more forward and innovative about how do we take the concept of cars, that is an ability for an individual to have the freedom to travel as and when they wish to, and look at how we do that. So there are stuff coming forward. Electric cars, but there are worries about electric cars, the weight of them, the size of the batteries, the fact that they in themselves are reliant on resources that are not renewable. But, you know, there's hydrogen coming forward, and we don't seem to have anything in our thinking or strategy, and it is a long-term strategy that you need, that is looking at that, about how we address that. So that's just me being a bit controversial to start with, to be fair. But if I look at the detail, there's a lot in here about supporting active travel, which I totally get and support. However, when it comes down to the reality of it, we have an active travel route in my ward that I'm now being told we're no longer going to fund repairing the lights on. So over time, what you're going to get is people stopping using that active travel route because it's dangerous, because it's dark and it's in a rural area. That's a council decision. That's not something the government is doing. That's something this council has decided to do, which I think is wrong. If we're going to support active travel, we need to follow through in terms of that. So I know Councillor Crook's aware of this one. He and I have talked about it before. But that, to me, is a perfect example of us talking the talk, but not then walking the walk. There's a lot of statements in here that don't seem to be backed up. So in 2.1, it talks about our approach focuses on a reduced need for the reliance on the private car. How have we determined that there's a reduced need? Because I don't see that or hear that out in my patch, because there isn't the public transport alternatives. So you're making statements, and our job here is to scrutinise. That's what we're here for. So I would question whether you can demonstrate the reduced need for reliance on private cars. There may be an aspiration, there may be an ambition, but there isn't an evidence base that says that is something there. We talk about fully integrated active travelling, so I make the point there about the fact that the council won't like the active travel routes. And we talk about affordable public transport at its heart, but it's only affordable public transport if it's available. Again, when you get yourself out of the town centres, you don't have much public transport. I don't see anything in here that's talking about transforming the availability of public transport. We talk about our strategy focusing on all communities being connected and having equal access to opportunities. Now, if Councillor Smage was here, she would be talking about the difficulty in her ward of getting to hospital. So if you're reliant on public transport from her ward, it's a minimum of 2 buses to get to the hospital. And I know that the majority of people in my ward, if they want to get to HRI, that's 2 buses. So, and given that the buses are very infrequent in the rural areas, it can take you the morning just to get to a hospital appointment. So we need, when we talk about how wonderful everything is, these are the reality for people that are reliant on public transport. You have situations where people can't get to visit their relatives because they can't get the bus times organised enough to enable them to get to Pinderfields or maybe to Calderdale. And if they don't have their own transport, they'll struggle. Moving on, again, it makes... What I don't get from this is what our transport vision is. There's lots of words, but when I think about the transport vision, I visualise in my head Kirklees, and I look at where we are and what are the connections into and out of Kirklees. And I'm looking at Edward now, and I know he probably knows what I'm going to talk about now. You know, I look at Huddersfield, and you've got a big town that is equidistant, roughly, from Leeds, Manchester and Sheffield. Yet there's nothing here that talks about us being at the centre of that. If you look at Kirklees, Kirklees is the only local authority that links the 3 mayoral areas of South Yorkshire, West Yorkshire and Greater Manchester. We don't talk about that. If you look at Kirklees, Kirklees is the only council area that actually borders all the other 4 West Yorkshire council areas. We don't talk about that. If you look at Kirklees, we have the M1 to our right, and just above us or touching us is the M62. We don't talk about that. They are the major routes across this country, and we should be making sure that we enable people to get into our district and out of our district, because that will be great for economic growth. Where's the talk about that? No mention of any of this here. When we talk about rail, we always talk about the Trans-Pennine upgrade. It's great, but it's happening. So you just tick that one. What are we doing to improve north-south? The Penistone line is somewhere mentioned in the details. Somewhere you'll find it eventually, but we don't really talk about it to the level that we should. We've just secured 48 million to do some improvements to the Penistone line, but it needs more than that. If we're going to get a half-hourly service, it needs further investment. It needs to be at the heart of our transport strategy, but it's not mentioned. You'd miss it if you didn't notice. So, whilst this is a document and it tells us a lot of information, I'm not sure it works. It doesn't do it for me. I can't. It doesn't bring to life for me what our transport strategy is. There's no forward thinking or innovation in here. There's no focus on what's already there and how we can better utilise that. And there's just an awful lot of words. You know, we talk about minimum 2 trains per hour on routes with various, you know, linking Barnsley and Halifax, etc. But it doesn't say by when. It doesn't have any ambition around that. We need to also think about developments. I mean, again, I'm being a bit parochial, but that's just because I know my ward. One of the major roads through my ward is the A629. Now, there are developments coming forward, both in my ward and Almondbury, housing developments, significant housing developments. But they're all being dealt with, understandably, as individual planning applications. And all of them are saying, well, we don't really need to do much about the roads. But actually, that road is getting to the stage where it's very, very difficult at peak times to get out of any of the joining roads, junctions, and turn right, just because of the volume of traffic. So there's no natural break in the traffic to enable you to get out. We've got a big development coming forward at Stores Hall, which the access down onto the A629 is dreadful, but they're going to argue that they're only putting up 200 houses, so it doesn't have the impact. What I don't see is a comprehensive transport strategy that's looking at key roads like that and going, what do we need to do to these key roads to make sure that we can support the development, which improves our economic growth and delivers for people? And I'm sure my colleagues here have the same issues in their wards. Whenever there's any planning application proposed, the first thing people start saying is there isn't adequate roads, there isn't adequate access, etc. And that's understandable because they can't see anything from the council about what the council is doing to improve those difficult points. We talk about supporting a comprehensive electrical vehicle charging network. Well, I've actually championed this in my ward because there was no provision for EV charging in my ward. So a couple of years ago, when we got the opportunity to prioritise some things, I prioritised electrical vehicle charging points in my ward and was given 2 schemes, one at Cliff House in Shepley and one at Burton Village Hall in High Burton. Now, one was a charity, one was a council building, so I was trying to understand how easy it was and what the process would be. They still haven't been delivered. The ones in Cliff House are there now. The ones in both of them I was promised would be delivered by the end of September last year. Still chasing. I talked to the Burton Village Hall trustees, and they're waiting on the council. So we talk the talk, but then when it comes to delivery, we're just not delivering on it. I think I've probably said enough. I'll pause there. I'm really passionate about this. I want to see us have a successful strategy. This doesn't do it for me. I'm sorry. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. A lot of comments there, questions there. Councillor Crook, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, John, for your questions. I think probably the first thing I'd just clarify that this is, you know, a working draft of a transport strategy, so it's not something which we would want to discuss individual projects within. Clearly, that would be perhaps the next item on the agenda would be a more appropriate time to discuss individual projects. But I will try and answer a couple of things in general terms that you've brought up, if that's all right. So I think I said in my introduction that the transport strategy was absolutely not anti-car. We're not opposed to car. It's about promoting active travel rather than working against cars, if that makes sense. We can promote modal shift through education, through giving people the advantage of making better choices, through improving public transport, through improving affordability and accessibility to public transport. And you're absolutely right on that. There is a discussion going on at the moment about how we improve access to buses, and a lot of that is around franchising through the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. You know, personally, I don't think it's any surprise that the place in the country where bus transport has grown and been very successful is the place in the country where regulated bus services remained in place. So, you know, I'm right behind that, and I hope you will join in supporting that move, which is being led by Tracy Brabin. So that will allow us to ensure that there are rural routes, that there is a sustainable network of buses that allows people to connect to the services they need. And I'm sure Councillor Smage would, as you say, be concerned about the rural routes that take from her ward to the hospital, for example. And that's the sort of route where, you know, bus companies might not find it profitable, but by franchising the service, we can ensure that that sort of route is available for communities. You talked about the lights on the active travel route in your ward. I think they've been replaced now, John, haven't they? Although I do understand.
The ones were broken have, but we've been told that they won't repair anymore.
Yeah, so there's as is well documented, a shortage of funding at the moment, so we have to make very difficult choices, and highways are not exempt from those pressures. I'm pleased they've been replaced now. Let's hope that they don't get vandalised again while the current financial climate is imposing restrictions on us. 2.1, you talk about reduced need. We're not promoting a reduced use of car. We're promoting alternative modes of transport, and I think that's in the wording.
I think the point says focuses on a reduced need for reliance on the public car,
yeah,
which suggests there is a reduced need for reliance, but it doesn't evidence how it demonstrates there's a reduced need for reliance.
Yeah, I don't read it that way. I read it as saying that we are promoting a reduced need, not that we're saying there's now a reduced need. But, you know, I think that's my understanding of our policy, that we're not going to prohibit use of car, but we are keen to promote alternative modes so that people can make a good choice to not use the car in all instances. If it's not far, leave the car, and so on. So I think that's perhaps just a little bit, the wording could perhaps be clearer to make that more easily understood. Then you talked about availability of public transport. Again, I would say that we've got enhancements to rail availability through TRU and through the fantastic win that we had on the Penistone line. But again, I'm happy to talk about that perhaps a little bit more in the next item on the agenda, where it's listed, explicitly. 2.2. The vision and I think you talked about economic growth being part of our transport strategy, and it certainly is, and celebrating our geographical advantages, positioned as we are in the centre of other big economic centres, is definitely front and centre in the inclusive economic strategy document, which perhaps will be taken in as another part to this discussion. And this transport strategy is not the only part of that discussion. So perhaps, that just sort of gives a bit more position on that. I've lost track of how many questions you asked, John. It's quite a number there. Oh, electric charging points. Yeah, absolutely. In my ward, we have a plan in place or plans working up to producing a higher availability of electric charging points. And I think the main problem is we need a national strategy on that, because even if you put plenty of electric points in the middle of town centres, you've still got people who don't have private drives and aren't able to charge their cars in that circumstance. So quite take your point on that, and I agree we need to do more work nationally as well as locally on how we ensure that everyone has access to that capacity. I think I've answered the questions that I'm able to answer there. I don't know if officers want to add any more detail to any of your points. No.
I think a lot of them are just really suggesting things that can make the strategy stronger and better, wasn't it, really? Not necessarily requiring specific answers today.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Crook, and thanks, Councillor Taylor. Councillor? Serena?
Yeah, thank you,
Yeah.
Alison. I've got a few questions and comments. I also feel there's a lack of detail within the strategy, and I think I've got a few concerns in terms of public safety. It's mentioned very briefly on page 21, Safety Across Goods and Services Act, but it doesn't actually address the safety for those people who are highway users, want to cross the road. And I'll give an example. Bradley Road, there's 30-mile-hour zones, there's 40-hour zones, and when it's heavily congested, the cars do slow down. But when it's not, you do get cars speeding down there. And it's an issue, and I don't feel the strategy kind of looks at that aspect. We put SIDS up and we take averages across the road, and highways have come back and said to us, well, actually, there's no issue, but there are peak times where there are issues and there's car speeding. So I think the strategy needs to be looking at those areas in more detail. The other issue, going on to electric vehicle charging points, is will the council be leading on it? Will they be introducing points within the town centre where cars can use that facility? I haven't seen anything of that either. And then going on to point 3.4, it touches on biodiversity, net gain, air quality considerations, but there's no detail. I would like to see how that would be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Amin. Moses, you want to take them questions?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Serena. So, I mean, I guess the main thing to say again is that this is working towards a strategy, so it's not about individual projects. So I can't really comment on individual road schemes. If you want to get into the detail of road safety, I mean, that did come to scrutiny last week as highways road safety as a subject, and I think that sort of detail would be probably better extracted from the subject matter in the appropriate forum, in the appropriate scrutiny meeting. So I can't really comment on that right just here. At 3.4 on the environmental impact of schemes and our strategy around that. Again, this is the detail here is a paper working towards a strategy, and it's not actually an environmental strategy, it's the transport strategy. So obviously our environmental impact is a strand, a thread which runs through everything that we do, and I'm absolutely agree with you on that, but having detail on that would not be part of this level of document at this stage in its development, in my view. Anything to add?
I think everything links, and I appreciate that this is transport strategy, but because everything links together, it would just be good to link in with the environmental aspect.
David.
Yeah, the point's come up a couple of times, and Councillor Crook has answered this, but just to be really clear, at the front of this document it says purpose of the report, to note the current status of the development of the Kirklees transport strategy. This is not intended to be the Kirklees transport strategy. It's a discussion to ensure that we get your comments as scrutiny members so that we can take those on board in the development of the transport strategy document. So whilst it's helpful to have the comments, I don't want any of the members of this committee to think this is the finished article or it was intended to be the finished article. It never was the case.
Thank you for that clarification, David. Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just make a few comments. I'm really glad to hear that active travel will be embedded and not viewed as an additional add-on in the transport strategy. It seems that we seem to lag behind Calderdale. They seem to be further on with their active travel than we are. And it's good to hear that Kirklees is ambitious, and it would like to see some of those ambitions come to successful outcomes. In terms of the being anti-car, I've got a comment about EVs because I've been driving one for a decade now, and mine's fairly old and short range, but generally I can manage with one charge a week for most local travel when I need to use it. So, but having more places where people can charge obviously will encourage people to come, especially if it's a sort of charger that takes a couple of hours. They'll come and have a couple of hours dwell time, maybe shop in the town while they're waiting for their vehicle to charge. So they don't all need to be high-speed chargers. You know, you need a range to suit different dwell times. I'm glad to hear we're not anti-car, and my vehicle is no more heavy than many of the 4x4s you see on the roads around Kirklees anyway, so I don't think weight is a particular issue in terms of damaging roads, if that was John's suggestion. I'm not sure it was. I'm glad to hear about the rail improvement, Penistone line, and look forward to the 1-hour journey, because I've heard it jokingly referred to as low speed 1 by many people. And obviously a lot of people rely on buses and don't have cars in their households, so it's good to see that we're looking at improving the bus services with West Yorkshire, because even people who go short journeys say there's only 1 bus an hour. They missed one, I had to wait another hour, and I was only trying to get to the local pharmacy, whatever. So especially with Kirklees being pretty hilly, I mean, I can walk into town in 20 minutes, it's just fine because I'm moderately fit, but walking back out of town, you can add another 10, 15 minutes to that. So I'm welcoming the ambition, and I'd like to see the successful outcomes. I accept that this is a draft and it's fairly high level, and we would obviously like to see far more detail. And I'd like to echo Councillor Amin's comment about safety for everybody who uses our roads, whether they're walking, cycling or driving. I think safety is of prime importance for all road users and active travel users. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Richards. Moses, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, mostly you've made some helpful comments, Sue, which we appreciate and will be noted. I'll answer a couple of things very briefly. The active travel being embedded in everything we do, I absolutely agree with you. I can't comment on where Calderdale are because I don't get briefings on their projects, but I think that there's a very positive ambition and programme here, and I hope that will pay dividends over time. Electric vehicles, yeah, I mean, we do need more chargers, but I quite take your point. Not everyone needs to charge every day, and certainly it's something that I'm aware of being incorporated to some of our projects, the availability of car chargers, that people could perhaps park their car overnight to get a weekly charge, and that would facilitate more widespread ownership of electric vehicles and support our our collective reduction in our the burden we place on the environment. The Penistone line, somewhere within the plans for that is speed enhancements on the line, so I hope in due course that line will be more regular and faster and more up to date. Safety on the highways, again, I was in Scrutiny last week, sitting just here talking about highways safety. We have a good record, and safety is being improved. The Vision Zero ambition across West Yorkshire is for zero killed and seriously injured KSI injuries on our networks by 2040, but within that there's an interim ambition of a halving of those accident rates by 2030, which is an ambitious but a very positive target, and I think we need to all work together to head towards that position. And that's, I think, all I'm going to say on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Could I just come back with just one?
Oh, sorry, go on. Supplementary.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. The other thing I'd like to see, obviously being a Green, is more emphasis on climate change and us reaching those ambitious targets we've set for 2038. Thank you.
Yeah, I quite agree. A focus on climate change is critically important, and I think that that is another thread which runs through everything that we do and all of our projects in Kirklees. So thank you for...
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. I think myself, Councillor Taylor and Councillor Crook all represent very rural wards, and it's very, very difficult to get around without a car. But the focus really does need to be on not demonising car users or whatever, but promoting active travel and public transport. I think the biggest thing that comes out when I discuss public transport with residents is, more than anything, it's not the cost of public transport, or the speed or whatever. It's the reliability. People just cannot trust the fact that the bus is going to show up. As someone who personally relies upon buses, it is incredibly frustrating to see those little digital displays, and it says it's going to be 1 minute and it gets to now, and then it still says now 2 minutes later, and suddenly it disappears, and I've no idea why that happens, and it's incredibly frustrating. Just a couple of points that I would make would be public transport in my ward in and out of Huddersfield is on paper very, very good, but it's the links between villages, and that's the bit that causes people to rely upon cars. In my ward, there used to be 2 buses, one that went to Halifax and one that went to Huddersfield Royal Infirmary, and those have been cut. And now it's not possible to get to a hospital on public transport if you don't go into town and then get another bus out of town. People quite simply just can rely upon either taxis or private car use now to get to a hospital. And also public links kind of from one valley to another valley. There are good links on paper between Slowett and Home Firth and Meltham, but they only seem to run during the day, and they start at 9 o'clock, which is absolutely rubbish if you work somewhere that's not Huddersfield. So it'd be good to see that reflected in the strategy. As well, the TRU is something that's really going to impact my ward, and it's something that I'm really happy to see. It's going to hopefully be a massive benefit to Kirklees, but we've personally found it pretty difficult to engage with TRU. I think we've noticed as well is that a lot of the public engagement is done by the communications team, and actually we've just done a massive engagement in Marsden, which hopefully will see a big investment in a train station to make it accessible. It's very, very difficult, for example, to get in touch with the TRU and the relevant bodies, because we have some sort of quite nice ideas about the old goods yard, which is the biggest car park in the village, but kind of using that as a gateway to Marsden, Tunnel End and the wider Peak District in South Pennines. It would be really good to kind of have a bit of a discussion there with the more technical side of people. I did a bit of research before this as well. There's like, I think 15 train stations in Kirklees, only 3 of them are fully accessible. That really needs to be a massive priority, because there's a huge number of people in my ward who are disabled who actually can't even get on a train. Not that they often don't show up anyway, so it would be a moot point. And as well, about EV charging points, one of the big problems is it's a lot easier to get one installed if you've got a private drive, but a huge amount of the housing stock in my ward is terraced housing, and that's true across the entire district. At that point, your only real choice is to install one on a public pavement, and that is significantly more difficult. So it would be good to see some sort of plans in place to see how we can address that problem.
Thanks, Harry. Moses, a lot of questions there.
Yeah, thanks very much, Harry. Hard to get around without a car in rural wards with steep hills. I mean, that is an issue, and I think we've mentioned before that the strategy will be about promoting alternative forms of transport. One of the things we're doing in my ward is promoting publicly available electric bike charging points as well. So electric assist bikes are an alternative form of transport to the car for hilly areas, perhaps, and we see a lot of that usage in my ward. But it's it's not one solution, it's multiple solutions, and that's why we need to have a well-developed strategy that takes into account these issues across the whole of Kirklees and delivers a way to allow people door-to-door travel opportunities beyond the car. Yeah. Reliability of public transport, I mean, we've already talked about this, the most used public transport in our area is buses. Buses are not working very well for people at the moment. Post-COVID, the use of buses has not recovered fully, and that's led to further cuts of routes because they're not profitable. I think that we need to move to my personal view, we need to move to a position where the driver of provision is service, not profit, and I think that the franchise model is probably one way that could be done, and that's certainly been explored at a West Yorkshire wide way at the moment. TRU, we've talked about a little bit. There'll be more detail on TRU in the next agenda item, I think, and that, I'll probably leave it there for that. You talked about accessibility of train stations. I know that as part of the TRU project and as part of the Penistone Line project, there will be upgrades to the train stations involved and they will become accessible. So I quite agree with you that that's an important step that needs to be taken, and it is in hand. It is being delivered. So thanks for your question.
Yeah, if I can just add to the answers Councillor Crook has given. With regard to reliability of bus service, again, it's come up before now from other members. We're very well aware of concerns across Kirklees with regards to reliability of bus service. Mayor Brabin has set this out as one of her primary targets to ensure that bus reform moves forward. Clearly, we need to work with Mayor Brabin in order to influence the bus operators, as well as ensure that they maintain the existing network and hopefully improve it in due course. As Councillor Crook has said, the model of bus services is currently under review, and that's not something that's entirely within the gift of Kirklees Council to determine. I have to be clear, we do not have finances available to subsidise additional bus routes or to reinstate bus routes that have unfortunately been lost, but we will continue to work clearly with West Yorkshire Combined Authority to look to improve the bus network in due course. In terms of TRU, I take the points around accessing Network Rail. We do have officer connections into Network Rail, so if you are experiencing further difficulty, I would advise that you get in touch with Edward and that we will seek to raise issues with Network Rail so that we can deal with whether there are particular concerns. I note you mentioned Marsden as well. Councillor Turner is going to be looking at wider issues with regards to Marsden, particularly given the funding that's coming into Marsden through government funding for the mill, but also the Transpennine upgrade, and looking how we can coordinate that along with local ward councillors in the not too distant future. So I appreciate there are specific issues around Kirklees, and you've highlighted one there in Marsden where perhaps a more coordinated approach will benefit everybody.
Councillor Turner.
Yeah, just to follow up on the Marsden issue, it's on my, we have a long report at my briefing tomorrow, so we are looking at Marsden as an area that needs investment and what we can do, piggybacking perhaps on some of the investment from the Levelling Up Fund. So yeah, we're on with it.
Thank you. Harry, you got a supplementary?
Yeah, just thanks to everyone who responded to that. I mean, that's really positive to hear all that. I guess I would just sort of ask a few supplementary questions about how this strategy, I know it's supposed to complement the West Yorkshire rail strategy and the mass transit strategy and so on, but I'm reading up on particularly the mass transit strategy as a result of what I sit on the West Yorkshire Combined Authority Transport Scrutiny panel. And one of the things that is quite striking about the mass transit plans are there's very, very little south of Huddersfield, particularly in Kirklees. It says we're going to link in with existing projects like the TRU and like the Penistone Line upgrade, but there isn't particularly much in there kind of south of Huddersfield. So it would be good to see kind of like some recognition of that in the plan. And also we've got some intelligence through kind of working with a local transport pressure group in my ward about how the suggestion that the third track between Huddersfield and Marsden, which is planned as part of the TRU, would become kind of a stopper line just for freight, which is kind of quite concerning because that would mean that we wouldn't be able to have the twice hourly services at Huddersfield and at Slowett and Marsden stations, one of the key points now in the current TRU upgrade. But I don't know if you've got any intelligence surrounding that, because I mean, this might be something to pick up with over directly, if that's okay.
Was that a comment? You don't come back to that?
I think it was mostly comment, wasn't it? I think the comments you made about mass transit, the geography plays a part in extending it, but I think there is, in the fullness of time, at least some discussion about an ambition to make it a fully West Yorkshire, West Yorkshire-wide strategy. But the details are yet to be confirmed on that. So I think mainly just comments and thanks would take them away.
Edward, yeah.
So I think the specific point you made around freight lines and around Marsden, I think I'm correct in saying that relates to what would be called W2C. So currently the Transpennine Rail upgrade that we all know and love is what's called W3. That's their designated title for the works packages. W2C would be the line that you're talking about. That's significantly further back in the programming. So, for example, if it is to proceed, it will need its own Transport and Works Act order. So if you imagine where we were 2 years ago as a council, trying to digest and understand the full implications of the Transpennine Rail upgrade works to determine our position in relation to the Transport Works Act order, that's exactly where we're going to be on W2C as well. It'll be another very, very significant thing. But the point I'm trying to make is all of that's ahead of us. We simply haven't seen that level of detail yet. There is noise out there. There are rumours. I've heard them too. But we haven't seen the level of detail yet. And it will go through the full public inquiry and Transport Works Act order process. So there's a long time to be talking about this and getting the detail right.
Thanks very much. Councillor Koshik.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of the concerns been raised. Yes, I can understand the active travel, why we are behind in Kirklees, because we are on the hills and the others, they're going so far. But my question is just for my own knowledge about the freight. Been keep hearing this thing like developing freights and this thing is going on. Any ideas when or developing whether we are bringing anything in Kirklees, depots or anything?
Freight. Yep. Plans regarding freight?
I don't think there's anything specific unless others are aware of. I think it's a general point that obviously a lot of vehicle movements on the network is freight related. With investment nationally around rail capacity, some of that rail capacity is some of it's about speed and reliability, but some of it is about capacity. And obviously the plan is that some of the freight movements which are currently on the road network could be more appropriately on the rail network over time, which would free up capacity on our strategic road network. So those are quite big, important trends and ambitions, but they're not something that's directly delivered by the council. As a council, I don't think we have a specific project or investment around freight per se. I think it's more about recognising the strategic importance of getting freight off the road network to release capacity.
Yeah, thanks, Edward. Any supplementary, Koshik? Chris?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, if I may. I like the idea of the canal cycle route. That's really good, but there's an issue of actually getting to the canal from, up in the hills and that. As part of this active travel, are you looking at routes down to the canal and things like that from, say, up in Scape or areas like that? I'm not going to talk about the buses and that because that's already been covered well. My other question is about safety. The only safe route down into Slough from where we live is by car because the roads are quite narrow. Cars travel quite quickly down there. If you actually walk, you really do need to wear a luminous jacket, or if you're on a bike, you need bright clothing. Now, I don't see anything here about educating walkers and cyclists into good practices. Can we include something like that in the strategy? Because at night, certainly up in Bolston Moor, you see people walking around with black clothes on, and there's going to be accidents. People will get killed unless they actually start wearing something luminous. And if we're encouraging people to walk and cycle, we really do need an education program, I think, for that sort of area. And other things like if you walk along the canal, now we do quite frequently do that, and it is a shared footpath. But the cyclists come along there at a really quick pace, and some of them shout at you, but nobody has a bell. Now, it would be really useful if we could educate people who are using shared footways that they do need something to announce their presence. That's it, thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris. Very good comments. Moses.
Thanks very much, Chris, for your comments. I won't answer the question about specific cycle access to the canal cycleway. I'll leave that to officers if they've got any comments to make on that. In terms of highway safety, as I said before, I was in Scrutiny last week talking about highway safety. It is something that we take very seriously and in line with the Vision Zero agenda for West Yorkshire. Within that, I did give some details last week about the education programmes that highway safety undertake. I forget the numbers exactly, but it's about 6,000 children have been accessed in the year to date, both in terms of education programmes about highway safety and active travel, making sure they're safe, but also cycle. In my day, it was called cycle proficiency training. I forget what it's called now, but it's cycle training for children anyway. So that's very positive. There's also the mode shift programme that we promote through highway safety, which is about encouraging schools to encourage their customers, pupils, to walk to school. And we've got 63 schools that have adopted, 62 schools, I apologise, who have adopted mode shift within Kirklees, and when schools do adopt mode shift, we see a reduction in car usage by 6.3%, which sounds quite low, but is actually a significant behaviour change. And I'm hoping that the education, along with programmes like mode shift, will mean that that next generation will have embedded in their way of life a behaviour change that involves more walking rather than driving. So I hope that gives you a little bit of background on the education. But it's not really the subject of this scrutiny meeting, but since it's fresh in my mind. Bells on cycles, yeah, or horns. I mean, anything around that, but I think you'd be looking at national policy rather than local policy to influence what was a requirement on cyclists. And just generally, it's a concern people have as we shift to a more active travel focused strategy that cycles will present a danger to pedestrians, and I'm sure that's true, but we need to take that in the context of the danger which is presented to both pedestrians and cyclists when they're travelling with 32-tonne articulated wagons. So in that context, it's a much reduced risk, but it is a real risk, and I take your point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. Couple more points. Apologies for yet more points. Firstly, when we're talking about public transport, again, what would be nice to see in the strategy around buses, in the more rural parts, what we tend to get is very infrequent large buses. What we'd like to have is much more frequent small buses. And what they have in the continent is interchanges. And in my head, I envisage the bus station at Waterloo being an interchange where all the little buses come from my ward and Denby Down by Morrison's. You know what I mean? Yeah. But all the buses coming through to there, and then people then picking up the big buses that are going into Huddersfield, and that then you could have smaller buses, maybe electric buses or something that are in the other areas, and I'm sure the similar could happen up in the valleys as well. So that's probably something to think about. My second point is just, I don't know whether this paper's going elsewhere or part of it will go elsewhere, but the first sentence on page 20 doesn't actually make sense. So obviously at some point something's been altered. And as I've said before in scrutiny meetings, it's useful to read your report to yourself before you submit them, because it just does not make sense. My third point, just to comment on the problem about accessibility to stations. I have one station in my ward where if you're disabled, you can get on the train to leave the village in one direction, but when you come back, you can't get off. So you've got disabled access on one side, but not the other, which is a bit perverse. And then finally, and again, looking bigger picture strategy-wise, when you talk about mass transit, going back to my comments earlier about the geographic positioning of Kirklees, if you look, they have a tram system in South Yorkshire, they have a tram system in Manchester, wouldn't it be good if we tried to link them all up? Even if they do have different sizes and gauges, you know, wouldn't it be a great idea to have a strategy that said, we're going to create a mass transit for the north? You know, start having our tube for the north. But again, instead of that, what we're going to do is we're going to have a line that goes from Leeds across to Bradford, down through Cleckheaton into Dewsbury. Not the place you would start. I was around, I was living in Altrincham when they first started the tubes back in, the trams back in Manchester, and they started with the Altrincham to Manchester line. I just think we need to think a bit bigger and think a bit more collaboratively about what's already there, what are the assets that are out there, how could we make better use of those and link better into them. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Crook, and then we'll move on because I think you've got to be in another meeting, haven't you, at 11:50?
Honestly, I can't remember what my schedule is
I've
after
just
this,
been,
but I've got a meeting.
given a little note that you're doing another meeting.
Oh, thank you very much for remembering that, Chair. Actually, the portfolio holder briefing that I had has been rescheduled.
So you're okay with time?
So I've got a little bit more time.
Oh, right, thanks very much. Okay.
Sorry.
Right, Moses, yeah.
Thanks for your comments, John. I think infrequent large buses is part of the problem that we have with bus provision, and I think we need to move. My personal view is we should move to a model where service is the focus rather than profit, and I think in that circumstance we will be able to get a better bus service for our communities. There are fringe programmes. So in my ward, the parish council funds some small bus provision that helps to give people a little bit of connection into the town centre, but obviously it's not a regular service, it's an infrequent service, and people have to plan around when it's there. So I totally take your point about that. Typo, grammar, page 20. I do apologise. I don't have the full agenda pack that you have, so the page numbering doesn't correlate with what I've got. I've actually got a previous draft of the paper, so I can't comment on which sentence that is. But I take your point. I certainly have read through it all, and we did have to, we picked up a few typos earlier on. But I take your point and apologise for that. Accessibility at stations. I think we've already talked about that, but good to illustrate that further. Thank you. And it's ridiculous if someone can get on a train in one direction and not the other. It doesn't make any sense at all. Mass transit, yes, I think it would be fantastic if we had a national transport policy that provided funding for us to have these bigger schemes. That unfortunately is not the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment. It would be nice, for example, if all of the funding from HS2 had been given to us to create a mass transit system for the whole of the north of England, but I don't suppose that's likely. But thanks for your comment.
Chair, can I just come back on that last point?
Let me just let Dave, I think, got his hand up, and then Graham.
Yeah, it was on that last point, Councillor Taylor, so if you might want to come back at this as well. The way that we've looked at in terms of the role of mass transit, it's an intra-regional transport mode. So it's not intended to be between regions. I appreciate that's your point. The modes that are intended to connect between regions are rail and road, and which links to your previous comment, which I thought was a fair comment around our strategy may well be improved if we start to look at the intra-regional links and what that does in terms of promoting the economic opportunity within the Kirklees area and how it can add value to the other regions that border us. But just to be clear, in terms of where officers have been developing the transport modes, the intra-regional links that mass transit affords, we are interested in the interface between mass transit and other forms of transport, so people can travel with ease across West Yorkshire and between points within West Yorkshire. It's not then to connect into other areas. If we were to do that, then it would need a significant change in policy direction, both from a national, a regional and a local transport strategy perspective.
I think that sounds fine, that sounds good, except if you live towards the borders of regions, actually you don't recognise that there's a big wall between South Yorkshire and West Yorkshire, although some people would like one. But if you live, in my area, people are more likely to go to Barnsley to shop than they are to go to even Huddersfield sometimes. And it's recognising those porous borders and recognising that it's about meeting the needs of local people and actually saying, because you live on the edge of a region, we're going to ignore you because we're going to focus in a different direction, is where actually you get quite a lot of that pushback and dissatisfaction from residents because they don't think they're being listened to. You know, they want to get to Barnsley as easily as they can get to Huddersfield. Or if they were in up the valley, presumably, they might want to get across to Manchester or to Oldham and Rochdale. And those communities, you know, they're invisible barriers. They're not borders. And we need to recognise that in our thinking and in our strategy. I don't think we do that today.
Graham, you had your hand up earlier on anyway. So does you want to come in now?
Yeah, I just want to talk to, John mentioned interchanges. So, I mean, probably while you were still in Altrincham playing with trams, we built an interchange in Denby Dale, and the idea that the buses and the trains would integrate. It got to the point where the people got that many headaches banging their head on a brick wall that we finally gave up any hope of ever integrating them, because we have the most fragmented bus service and rail service in Europe, possibly in the world, and getting all the different companies to talk to each other, to try and arrange things to coincide that the bus was there when the train was there, and the train was there when the bus was there, and all that proved absolutely impossible. And as I said, people had so many headaches, banging their head in a brick wall, trying to get these companies to talk to each other. It was ridiculous. Now, it's a great facility. I'm not saying it's a waste of money, but it never achieved what it was set out to because of this fragmented system we have. And you talk about the continent, and you're absolutely right. Their timetables are what I call an aspiration or a target. If your train's 2 minutes late in this country, it's a crisis. It's 2 minutes late. I drive in here every day nearly, and I can't tell you within 5 or 10 minutes what traffic lights I'm going to hit. So I can't tell you what time I'm going to hit. But we set around this. It's got to be. It says it's going to be at 9 o'clock. 2 minutes past not good enough. Continentals, and they have a different system where I've used mass transit systems abroad. The bus waits for the train. So if the train's a bit late, there's a bus waiting for you. And when you get back on the bus to the train waits for you. So I say their timetables are an aspiration, not a target. And that works really, really well. But here we're fixated on, it's got to be on time. We can't have this because my bus might be a bit late, the train won't wait for you. So we need a whole step change. And if we did that and had some logical national policy around transport infrastructure and how it works, that's what we need. This fragmented system of bus companies saying, well, my bus needs to be here at 5 past and train says I'm going to be here at 10 past. It doesn't work. And that's one of the problems. We're fragmented.
Chair.
John,
just come back. I do apologise for setting Graham off on the rant. When I was talking about interchanges, I was only talking about for buses. I wasn't trying to get to the stage where we were trying to link trains. And what I was thinking about is you can drop people off somewhere where they may wait 5 minutes or so for the bus into Huddersfield, or the bus comes out of Huddersfield and they wait to pick up their little bus to go out into the, rather than having these big buses doing the long journeys. So that by the time they get out to my patch, or where Graham used to represent in Denby Dale, the big bus is nearly empty. It's not an efficient use of resource either. That's all I was thinking is, think about small bus interchanges at appropriate points as you come out of the heavy populated urban areas, so that you can have frequent buses doing that, in my sense, from Waterloo into Huddersfield and coming out again, and then smaller buses that then take it from Waterloo up through into the little villages and the more rural areas. I'm sure the same would work elsewhere.
Yeah, right,
Thank you, Chair.
I don't think I've got any more questions on this item. But just one question from myself, and if you can't answer it, then if you can get back to us. Back in October, there was an announcement, I think it was £6.5 billion available for transport schemes. I've seen a lot of press around that in terms of how that money is being divided up. And historically, we've actually had unfair funding compared to North and South. So out of the 6.5 billion, maybe David might have some information on this, the 6.5 billion that was announced in October, how much of that is coming into West Yorkshire?
Are you referring to the monies that were repatriated from HS2? That's where there's significant amounts of money. I think there's a slight difference because I think that it's more than £6.5 billion nationally. The government have set out, and I can provide the answer, the government have set out where they see that money going, and it's not all going into the north. Some of it's going into the Midlands and some of it is going into the south. They've also split between what goes into various different projects. So some of it is going into improved roads throughout the whole of the country, and others they've asked for the combined authorities in the various regions to put forward their proposals as to what that money should be used for. So in West Yorkshire, there is an ongoing discussion between leaders and the mayor at the present time, alongside other colleagues from the rest of Yorkshire, as to which schemes will be put forward. Clearly, from a Kirklees perspective, we're quite supportive of a number of the schemes if they're going to get funded. However, what we want to make sure is the schemes that all members have worked on, particularly the Penistone line, is recognised in additional funding, because whilst it's very helpful to have the funding for the Penistone line from the Levelling Up Fund monies and the announcement, nearly £48 million at a similar time to that announcement, in order to deliver all of the improvements on the Penistone line, it will cost in the region of £113 million. And I think I can speak on behalf of members across groups. The suggestion that's put forward from Kirklees is that a small amount of the available transport monies that have been made available from HS2 should be put towards the Penistone line to ensure that it delivers all of the benefits of a twice-an-hour service and getting to times of less than an hour between Sheffield and Huddersfield. So hopefully that gives you an answer for now, but we will send on the breakdown in due course, Councillor Pandor.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think I've got anybody else with the hands up, so I'll just try and recap the key issues that have come out. And firstly, thank you very much, members, for the valuable input, and thank you to Rashid for your excellent report. If you want to add anything, final words, you're more than happy to do before I...
No, I'm fine, Chair. Thanks for that. Thank you very much.
And thanks to councillors and officers for their responses. I think a few things that came out was charging points, and I do understand that, especially what Harry said, that if you got rows of terrace houses and you're trying to get them to charge the cars up, how do you sort that big problem out? And that is a big question. And I think Moses was right in terms of saying that there needs to be a national strategy around that. Community safety is a massive issue. I think both Councillor Richards and Councillor Amin highlighted that, so I'm sure you'll pick that up where you can in the report. And bus reform, that's a massive debate that's going on, and we need to make sure that we feed into that to make sure that we do get the buses where they're needed and try and get people away from the cars more into using buses. But I think one of the key things is that impact on that shift from people using the cars into transport is a big question, and I think we can't answer it here. It's a national question, but we just need to understand that what are the issues and what are the impacts, and if we can actually just highlight some of the issues in our strategy, because we don't have all the solutions to the problems. They're a bigger issue that we need to address, which we can't unless it's actually done through a national strategy. The other thing that's not really, I didn't see it, so my apologies if I misread the report, but impact on health and air pollution, because we've got some points within Kirklees where you've got really, really poor air quality, and that's going to be a massive issue going forward. So if we can actually just try and get some input through health, because the wider detriments around health and transport and community safety, it's all linked up. And then maybe some kind of summary in terms of, making it clear what we can do and what we can't do, because what we don't want to do is write a strategy which is really, really good, but, a lot of questions coming back, which we can't really have an influence over. So if you have some kind of an appendices in terms of what are the limitations in the strategy, so it's very, very clear what difference we can make. And it's not all about resources, but resources do have an impact. So members, is that a fair summary of what the issues I've heard? And obviously the canal and the active travel and all the rest of it in terms of, you know, getting people out there into communities walking, and again that's got a wide detriment around health. So it's how we actually bring the active travel to life, and that's probably more linked to leisure as well. Is that a fair summary? Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Crook, for your report, and Councillor Turner, and David, and Edward, and Rashid. What we'll do is we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 8, Major Projects Transport Programme Update. Rashid, I believe you're going to be, or is it Moses, and then Moses, yeah, I'll leave you to who you want to take forward in terms of the report. Moses.
Thanks very much, Chair. So I'll, again, with this major projects transport programme update, I will give a quick introduction and then pass over to Rashid to add some more detail. So Scrutiny's asked for an update here on various aspects of our transport programme, including delivery of current programmes, future programmes, details around the Trans-Pennine route upgrade, and how these programmes interlink or link into our transport strategy. This report introduces and explains the various transport schemes underway and in development, as well as touching on schemes which are currently paused at various stages, due in part to inflation and the broader economic situation. The schemes covered include both local Kirklees capital projects on our highways and active travel routes, as well as details on larger schemes such as the transformative Trans-Pennine route upgrade. There is detail on how our transport strategy informs projects and the priorities within projects, as well as on work to ensure that the Trans-Pennine route upgrade scheme delivers maximum benefit for Kirklees, including through first and last mile, providing links into communities, supporting mode shift and inclusive economic growth. Just as an aside, it's important that we do work to maximise benefit here, to demonstrate additional benefits that can then transpose onto positive business case development to support Kirklees' inclusion in future potential large-scale and regional national transport schemes. And we've talked a lot about mass transit, so there's a case in point there. I'd also like to say that whilst the current economic conditions and inflationary pressures have resulted in several capital programmes within Kirklees being paused at various stages, the inclusion of these positive forward-looking projects in a pipeline of projects ready for funding does give us significant advantage and a head start, if you like, when bidding into future funding streams. So work already put into schemes is not wasted or lost in any way. Kirklees has demonstrated the efficacy of this pipeline approach through the recent success of being awarded funding through the Levelling Up Fund Round 3 for the Penistone Line upgrade, which had previously been bid into Levelling Up Round 2 and so on. The proposal started many years ago and the ultimate success was on the back of previous unsuccessful bids. And by the way, this is, I think, a huge success for Kirklees officers, demonstrating that our transport scheme development strategy and programme is very much fit for purpose. Anyway, I'll leave it there and hand over to Rashid to provide a bit more detail on some of these, and obviously happy to answer questions after that.
Thanks, Chair. And I'll just basically do what I've done for the previous paper. I'll just quickly summarise what's in the paper in more detail. The paper came with 2 appendices. Appendix 1 has got the projects in detail. It shows the programmes in the best we can in accordance to the funding streams that we've got. And Appendix 2 did show some of the visuals for TI, which I'll touch on later on in the paper. So in summary, the paper was to give an update on the transport schemes, what's been done to date, and what are the key milestones ahead of us, and some information on the TIU going forward. The paper then looks at 3 of the main funding streams that we have that supports the Transport Plan Capital Programme, and they are the West Yorkshire Transport Fund, the TCF and the Active Travel Fund. The CRSTS and the Active and the TCF. And I'll just briefly give you a bit of a background on what they are, very, very briefly. The West Yorkshire Transport Fund, it was established back in 2014. It was set out many years ago to establish a £1 billion fund. It had a key focus on looking at the strategic transport movements of traffic within the district. It had a focus around orbital routes, route corridor improvements, trying to get better public transport options within the district. Looking at movements between district hubs provide capacity and better connectivity. And it was also to, I suppose, touch on some of the conversation that we've had earlier today about enhancing our rail station gateways and access to them. The other big fund stream that we've got is the CRSTS. It's the City Regional Sustainable Transport Fund. It was primarily set up to look at making transformational changes. It was a 5-year program. It started back in 2022, and the program's hoped to end in 2027. There are conversations taking place about a CRS-TS2, which will develop that for the next 5 years beyond 2027. The purpose of the program was to fund improvements towards walking and cycling infrastructure, enabling people to access public transport and promote walking and cycling. The other big one was the TCF. Now that's formed part of the CRSTS. Quite similarly, it was about, they had a key focus on accessibility, producing attractive and clean alternative modes of transport to car journeys. A key focus was around accessibility, connecting people to economic and educational centres. I think we talked a bit about that. And to the issue that one of the members have raised is about the focus on TCF is about making healthier communities for the future. It has a focus on air pollution and carbon emissions. The last funding stream that I talk about in the paper is the Active Travel Fund. It was set up to create more space for cycling and walking while easing the pressure on public transport and relieving congestion that we see on our current networks. We've had some success. We've talked a bit about this earlier. We've got 2 schemes that we were reasonably successful on the Active Travel 4. Some in the region of 2.3 million, and that was the Huddersfield Narrow Canal Phase 3, Slathwick to Marsden, and the Huddersfield Broad Canal, Aspley, Marine to Cooper Bridge. The Appendix 1 has a lot more detail about the individual projects, and they have been identified as either CRSTS or Active Travel, just to help you navigate that. I didn't go talk about it a bit in the paper about the current funding position. We've had challenges. The inflation has an impact on the programme. It's underfunded. So we've had, back in 2022, there was an inflation review that required us to return some of the money. And this was not just common to Kirklees, it was for all the districts within West Yorkshire. That conversation is happening whilst we try to firm up our funding strategy moving forward. So that's me done the funding strategy. Then the paper just looks at the works on the TRU that we're doing. It sets out the purpose of the scheme, how long it is, how much it's going to cost. A key focus is probably paragraph 252. That helps to kind of identify the parts that are relevant to Kirklees, and we've touched on some of the descriptions. So W3 is the section in green. It's the one that goes from Huddersfield to the west of Dewsbury. That's where the works have started, and to follow there will be a W2C section that we've talked about earlier that will have what we've been informed by Network Rail that will require another Transport Works Act order, and so we are aware of that, and we are in conversation with Network Rail about ensuring that we get our preparation right for that. And then there's the W3, which is a section from Dewsbury to Barley, then it goes into towards Leeds. The paper then touches on some of the working arrangements that we've got with TRU. We're aware of some of the issues that have been raised certainly in this committee and previously with members about signage and closure of greenways. But the service is quite well set up to try to respond to those issues. We have a number of working groups set up, and I'll list out those working groups. There are 7 that are set up. And they are the Highways Network Management Group, Property Group, the Planning and the Environment Group, the Heritage Group, the Waste Project Delivery Group, and the Communications Group. Lastly is the Biodiversity Lands Group. And these groups meet quite regularly where these conversations take place, and it's about ensuring that the works that the TRU are doing within districts are doing in a way that cause little disruption to our residents and our communities. But it's a fast-paced programme. Things move very quickly, and we do have processes within the service where issues aren't getting resolved we have various other, within the board structure, we do raise these with the senior managers within Network Rail to ensure that we get prompt responses to the concerns that members and the residents raised. Then we touched about, did I quickly go on to, in areas of 255, there's a bit of a detail about what the actual current construction programme looks like. And then I touched a bit about mass transit. We've talked a bit about that already. And it just sets out what its ambitions are and vision. I'll just quickly highlight a few. It's really there to support us in challenging, combating climate change, providing a real and sustainable alternative to car, cutting emissions and improving air quality, a very strong ambition of the councils. And in that is to support productivity and inclusive growth moving forward. And currently it's setting out the SOQ, the strategic outline case for the mass transit. That's currently the main step that WICA are preparing at the moment, and we are working with WICA in helping to shape that. In that it brings us, we as officers and spot members, that we maximise the benefits for the district. Lastly, I touched on the Peninsula Line. We've talked about that. It was successful, very happy with that. There's 48 million has been secured. We are now working with our colleagues in the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, with WICA and the South Yorkshire Mayor Combined Authorities, including the TFN, Transport for North, Network Rail, in trying to come together and trying to come to an understanding and a governance structure that will help us to deliver that project going forward. And then lastly, I touched on the strategic transport priorities, but we've had a good discussion about that in the previous paper, so I won't go through much of that in any detail. Chair, I'll end it there, hand it back. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rashid, for your report. Any questions? John, you got a hand up.
Thanks, Rashid. Fortunately, I've got less questions this time than last time. But, firstly, just on 2.4, where it talks about the schemes that have been paused or reduced in scope, I don't actually know what M2D2L is. So, A, can you tell us, but just then think about in future, you know, that if you're producing reports, not all of us have the same level of knowledge of the schemes as you do. I generally haven't got Scooby-Doo about what that relates to. My other questions, you'll not be surprised, are around the Penistone line, and it's great to see that, you know, we're talking with our partners and hoping to move things forward. I'm just wondering what involvement there's going to be for councillors in that. You know, there's a board, there's going to be regular discussions. Obviously, we need to know what's going on. We need to be able to influence what's going on. But also we need to represent in and back out the views of local residents as well. So I'm not sure how that's proposed to be managed at all. So it'd be interesting knowing that. There, to be honest, my only questions. My only other comment would be, it's great to see this scale of investment. It's a shame there's none in the south of the borough, other than, sorry, Homeforth Town Centre, nearly missed it. But other than that, there's nothing else in my patch. Thank you.
So, Charles, I'll take the question on the M2D2L. Yeah, sorry about Charles, I'll take that observation forward. So it stands for Murfield to Dewsbury to Leeds. That's what it stands for. Yeah, I'd correct that in future papers. But it was there to set up to, you know, give access to jobs, education services, and improve, look at cycle tracks, look at pedestrian crossings, footway improvements, bus lanes, and provide upgrades to any bus stops that was required. That was the purpose and the background of the scheme. So I'll end that there.
Yeah, it's a really important point. I mean, we're meeting with colleagues from central government this week to understand what some of the funding agreement's going to look like. So it is very, very early days. We need to get all the MPs on the line who've worked so hard to get us the money. They need to stay involved, and obviously ward councillors, where there are stations in the wards, engaging on the local feedback and your knowledge of the local areas. So the honest answer is we haven't defined what that's going to be, but I think that's a really useful reminder that it needs to be hardwired in from the start. So we'll make sure that happens.
Okay, supplementary, John, or are you okay with that for the time being?
I'm fine with that.
Councillor Amin?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a comment. It has already been touched on, and I don't actually expect a response. I just think it'd be a good idea to highlight it. All the improvements are very welcome, and it's really good to see the introduction of mobility hubs at several stations. I think my concern is it would be, from Joe Public's point of view, there's a lot of money being spent on improvement in stations, but not on reliability of trains and buses, etc. And I honestly appreciate that is well out of the remit of what we can do. That is down to the bus companies, the train companies, but I think it's just for public to know that we can't control that. And I do appreciate that as a local authority we are trying, and the efforts from Tracy Braben as well. So that was just that comment. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to respond to that comment or take that comment on?
I mean, I take your comment. It's really important that we get reliable services. I would say, particularly in the Penistone line, for example, there's a bypass track as part of the proposal, which will allow any delayed train to be put out of the way, so other trains can stay on time. So that should improve reliability. And I think in the TRU programme, there's increased line capacity as well. So that should see reliability as well as speed and frequency enhancements. So it is something that everyone's aware of and are working towards. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any more questions, Harry?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, sorry, a few questions again and comments. The first was just to congratulate officers on the work that they've done on the Trans-Pennine route upgrade, the bid. I used to take that, when I lived in Honley, I used to take those trains a lot, both to Huddersfield and to Sheffield. Any improvements that can be made on that service would be massively appreciated. I've mentioned it in the last agenda item, but the importance of linking the benefits that come from the TR upgrade with wider projects in the area, so particularly the Marsden Blueprint and what's coming out of the Marsden Plate Standards, just to make sure these things are linked in, would be fantastic. I've got a specific question about the canal towpath. It's brilliant to see the canal towpath being resurfaced between Slowett and Marsden, but from Slowett to Huddersfield, it's been resurfaced, and I think people will genuinely think it's been a fantastic amount of investment in my ward and in Graham's ward and in the wards close to Huddersfield. We do have a little bit of a problem though, which is that it's been closed at Longroy Bridge now for months. I mean, it must be approaching a year, because there is a wall that is basically not quite stable. I've not actually been there to inspect it myself. So it's a question about how, we put a lot of investment into these areas, but, the follow-through can be sometimes as important, because to put a lot of investment into these towpaths and then for them to be closed for a while, it is quite frustrating. Thank you.
A few questions there. Graham, you want to answer that?
Yes, are you talking about the wall that runs along the side of the road? So that road junction, as somebody uses it every day nearly, is one of our most congested junctions, and there's an improvement plan due for later this year. Part of that plan is to have the wall done before we do the road. So Canal Trust are in very much aware of it, and it's in their programme to get it done, because they need to do that before we can do the road. So touch wood, we're going to get some movement on it shortly. Now we've got the winter out of the way. Sorry? Who knows?
Anybody else wants to come in? Are you okay? Any more questions from Chris?
Yeah, just one. Can you elaborate on section 2.6 where you talk about strategic transport priorities? There's one statement there which is very ambitious, and I think a lot of people might just misinterpret it. It says all communities across the district are connected and have equal access to opportunities. Now, sort of connecting all communities sounds very aspirational, but not really doable. And what do you mean by opportunities?
Moses, Edward?
I'd say the point, I mean, that's some quite broad, very aspirational language, isn't it, really? I think it's trying to pick up on and reflect some of the things we touched upon before, which is, in terms of all communities across the district, is that obviously there are some places that are better connected than other. We've got quite a distinct differences between our population. Some are much more rural than others. So the kind of problems that people experience that you've all mentioned today, it's trying to get across a sense that our aspiration is that everybody should have the benefit of good quality transport infrastructure, whether that's bus or rail or whatever, not just some of the district. And then equal access to opportunities is fundamentally trying to recognise the economic role that transport plays and its impact on someone's quality of life. So whether it's accessing health services or whether it's accessing employment opportunities, it's trying to, I think, recognise that that reliability, that frequency, that confidence you have in your local transport, particularly if you don't have a car, perhaps you suffer from poor mobility yourself or poor health or you're elderly, has an absolutely massive impact on someone's ability to access things that other people take for granted. So I think it is aspirational. All communities across the district are connected and have equal access. We know we're a long way short of that, really, but I think it was trying to get across that some of the factors we've talked about this morning.
Thanks, Edward. Is that okay, Chris? Okay, any more questions from members? No? Any final comments before I summarise? Just one question from me. Back in November, as a result of HS2 cancellation, there was an announcement of £8 billion of money that would be invested in roads and transport. I think 3.3 billion of that went to the north, including Yorkshire and Humber. Does this programme include the schemes that may be coming out from there, or is that still being worked up?
So no, it doesn't. So this report and the projects that are identified in the appendix are largely projects we've been working on for some time. Some considerable time in some cases. The money I think you're referring to is what David was touching upon earlier, where government announced there would be the money that was saved by ditching HS2 Eastern Leg would be reinvested into other transport schemes. Some of that's gone into things like potholes, and I think that money is starting to come through to local levels. Some of that money was for some identified schemes, and there's more work to be done on them. But the direct answer is no. These projects here are ones that are using the funding sources that Rash went through, really, the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, Active Travel England funding, and money that we get through the West Yorkshire Combined Authority through the Transport Fund. So hopefully, if those sort of bigger sums that we talked around in terms of the HS2 money would hopefully fund future generation of schemes.
Thank you very much for that clarification. On that note, I don't think I've got any more questions or anybody putting their hand up. So once again, Rashid, thank you for your report. Do you want to add any final comments, or are you okay?
Oh, thank you, Chair. No final comments. Thanks again.
Right. Thanks, Councillor Moses Crook, Councillor Graham Turner, David Shepherd and Edward also for your presentations and your input. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the work programme and forward plan, item 9. Jen, do you want to take us through this?
It's just, if the panel, we usually put it on the agenda for information, unless the panel have any comments or questions they want to ask with regard to that item.
Right, okay. Any questions or comments regarding the work programme?
I need Harry. When we talked about Marsden, and talking about Marsden, which we're doing at the last meeting, weren't we originally going to go to Marsden for it?
There was a suggestion. I appreciate it's quite difficult for officers to do that, but I mean, if people want to look around Marsden, I could show them around at some point.
I'm fine either way. I mean, if we're meeting in Huddersfield is easier for me, but I thought that was the intention. But if it's not, that's fine.
Yeah. So are we saying a meeting in Marsden?
I'm not so sure.
Sorry, Harry, just clarify what we...
I think we were going to explore that option, but if it's possible, we can do. But if it's not possible, because I appreciate it's difficult for webcasting and for the IT team to broadcast it and stuff.
What I'll do is I'll have a conversation with Jenny offline, and we'll see how feasible that is. We'll look at that. Okay. Any more questions or comments regarding the work programme? Look, if there's any issues anybody's got, drop me a line. I'm happy to take a call and have a quick conversation. Is that okay? Is that okay, Jim? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's the end of the, yeah. Yeah, so that's the end of the agenda. Thank you very much, members, for attending, and I'll see you at the next meeting. Thank you, and bye-bye.